Hey guys, for contemporary Shakespeare, more specifically for my teach assignment, I wrote a 90-minute lesson plan for freshmen and sophomores that has to do with learning the meaning behind Shakespeare's words. So in the prior lesson, they had learned about iambic pentameter and the rhythm to Shakespeare's writing. So we're going to move into, well, what do his words mean? And then eventually, this lesson plan is integrated into that. Eventually they'll be able to read Romeo and Juliet. So the lesson goals are to be able to define and use denotation, connotation, metaphors, similes, figurative language. So not only being able to define that, but being able to put that to use with Shakespeare's writing. So I've included a state standard, and the lesson objectives is that they need to be able to explain the emotions attached to the words, not just the definitions. So you'll need a few materials. I used my computer. Obviously, I didn't have a projector. I also used Netflix to show the copy of Romeo and Juliet that goes along with my scene. I wish I had a blackboard or a whiteboard, but writing the definitions for them and having them write that in their notebook is great. It will help them understand it before we start the lesson. So you'll need Netflix, like I said. Romeo and Juliet is available on there. I did 2 worksheets. One had a copy of modern lyrics, and I used Coldplay's Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. And then I used one scene from Romeo and Juliet, and it's when Romeo's under the balcony in scene 2, I believe. The students will need a pen or a pencil, a piece of paper, or a notebook. And then you will need access to YouTube, so you can play Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. Now, I played this as the students walked in.
Has anybody heard of the word denotation before?
Yes.
Does anyone have any idea what denotation is and can define it?
Nope. Are you filming it?
Yep. So you're going to want to set your students up with writing down the words in their notebook and really hammering in what is denotation, what is connotation, etc. You're going to talk about that as a class before you move on to the Coldplay lyrics or whatever music of your choice that you think is relevant to trying to understand figurative language. So after the kids have written down and defined the vocabulary words and you get a feel that they're starting to understand it, then we're going to move on to handing out the worksheets to them. So I stapled the 2 papers together. The front sheet was my Coldplay lyrics, and the back sheet was the Romeo and Juliet scene. So starting out with the Coldplay lyrics, what I did is I gave them directions. I told them that we're going to be watching the Coldplay and I wanted them to follow along as the lyrics were heard. And there were 2 instructions. The first instruction was that they needed to circle any word that they did not understand, so that using denotation we could look up what that word means. And then they were to underline any sort of figurative language that they found interesting, any phrases that maybe confused them because it wasn't straightforward. Those were their 2 instructions, and they did that as the music played.
Okay, can anybody give me any words that you circled?
Cathedral.
So we'll have a very short discussion as a class, and then after this, I will give them more instructions.
What we're going to do now is I'm going to let you choose your own groups. Choose wisely. You're going to break up into your groups, and then using your lyric sheets, you need to share what you circled. And together, using the dictionary on your computers, you're going to look up the words, and either on the back of your paper or in the margins, you're going to write the definitions to the words that you circled. Help your other group members if they circled something other than you. And then you guys are going to talk about what you underlined and try to see what it means by looking at the surrounding text. And then we'll come back and talk about it as a class.
So after they have gotten into their groups, looked up words, discussed, then we'll move on to Romeo and Juliet.
We're just using one scene and one line from Romeo and Juliet before we read the play. But I want you guys to see and compare. Even though this language is a lot harder to read than this, they're still doing the same thing with denotation, connotation, metaphors, similes. So what we're going to do is I have an adaptation of the actual play. And I've picked out the scene that you have on your paper. So circled words that you don't understand or underline any phrases where they use figurative language.
Romeo! Dakota! He just as stars never felt a wound.
So they will break up into groups again after they have watched the clip. And if the groups did not work the last time, then just do this as a class. If the groups worked, then have them look up words, discuss figurative language, but make sure you as an instructor are walking around the room and observing and helping if they need you. So then for the last few minutes of the lesson, see if they have any questions. What I did was assign the homework for the next class, which meant that we were moving on to starting to read Romeo and Juliet, and let them know that there will be a quiz coming up about the terms that we learned, like denotation, connotation. So that wraps up the lesson, and you can check out my lesson plan for all of the links that you will need. Thanks.